Yes, David Thompson reporting there. Well, Joe Valentine is still with us, and we've been joined by the Conservative backbench MP, Mark Reckless. Welcome to the Daily Politics. I mean, Joe Valentine, why do you think there is a move in government to take students out of the immigration statistics?
Well, I think it's rather confusing because, as we heard there, they come for a certain length of time. Actually, nobody counts them out, so we don't really know what's going on. The government has a net migration target. Surely, in order to know whether it's hitting that, it needs to know when these students actually leave. At the moment, they don't have robust data.
Although we heard in that film, the statistics showed that 20% of those non-EU students you talk about never leave again, they stay.
I don't believe we have accurate data on that.
What do you say to that? No accurate data to actually say whether these students are going home?
I think the 20% is about right. And
but how do you know?
Well, because we have a net migration survey through the International Passenger Survey, and that's where the net migration statistics are sourced. What we don't know is precisely the student number, because when people leave, they're asked why they're leaving, and often they'll say because they're going to a job in their home country rather than because they're stopping being a student. But what the government is doing is taking action on the student route, on the family route, on business visas, and overall pressing down on immigration to hit our target of cutting it from hundreds of thousands to tens of thousands a year.
What would your response be if the government did decide to take non-EU students out of those figures?
Well, I think that would be a mistake for the reasons we've given. I think it would be difficult to do.
Do you think they're going to do it? I mean, is that what you're hearing?
No, I don't. Well, I'm spoken to Damien Green, and I think he's closest to it. I think it would technically be very difficult to do, but also the government has cut down a lot of this abuse of the student visa. So actually, in terms of the net migration, where we should be seeing big reductions over the next year or so, is from that student channel, because of the work this government's done to tighten up the system.
I suppose there is an argument, and I don't know, Joe Valentine, will you say this, where actually this is, a big export of ours, higher education, universities. What damage, if that's how it's seen, what damage does it do restricting the number or putting a cap?
I think that the trouble is, I think it's about perception as much as anything. We absolutely, in the next phase, need to be seen as a welcoming country, London and the rest of the world. And we want good international students. Of course we don't want bogus colleges, but we want those international students who will come here and study and trade with us in the future, add to our cultural life, be part of the mix in London. So anything which sends the message that we actually are not as welcome as we were for students, and indeed more than half of the current students are saying they wouldn't recommend the UK now as a place to come. That was in an NUS survey. That's not good from our perspective.
Well, that's the last thing the government wants, particularly in these tough economic times. You don't want to cut off that supply of foreign money coming into the country.
I think perception is an issue. I'd ask Lady Valentine and others actually not to talk down the UK in this area, because I think the government's brought in some sensible reforms to tighten the system. But there isn't, if people are coming for a degree to a recognised university, they can do that. Indeed, they're still going to be allowed to stay on if they get a graduate job paying 20,000 or more. People are still allowed, uniquely, Australia it happens, but nowhere else in the world, I think, do you do this, where you come somewhere supposedly to come to university and you're allowed just to stay on and join the labour market after you finish your degree.
But you deny that perception's coming through, because there is a lot of anecdotal evidence from foreign students saying that either they don't feel welcome or it is much more difficult to come here. I mean, even Vince Cable, the business secretary, has sympathies lying in that direction, which is why there is a belief they're going to change the policy.
Well, I mean, it should be more difficult to come here, because under the previous government it was just a gaping hole in our immigration system, and vast numbers of people were coming either not to study at all, or their main motivation was work rather than study. So actually I think tightening that up and focusing on the universities and the highest quality, making sure people really are studying, I think that's the right policy.
What do you say to that?
I think the Home Office data needs to be a lot smarter than it currently is. We can't differentiate very well between, as it were, a good student and a bogus student. If you take Chinese tourists, we're getting 5% of the visitors to the rest of Europe. So we're missing out on huge income from that.
Yeah,
and that's because we have a very clunky system which actually doesn't differentiate between someone trying to disappear into the undergrowth and a high-spending tourist arriving.
Yes, so you're using a sledgehammer to drive a crack a nut.
We're an island. We've got our own border controls. I welcome that. I don't want to join Schengen. I don't want the EU taking over our border controls and our immigration. And yet we hear from the lobbies, we hear from business, we hear from universities, we see from Indian IT companies. But I want to speak for my constituents who feel for far too long under the previous government there was net immigration over 200,000 a year. They want to see that back to where it was was when there was a Conservative government, restricted to tens of thousands, and I think we should keep that promise to our constituents.
I mean, Mark Rectors is representing a view that many people feel in this country. I mean, do you oppose the idea of a migration cap completely?
Well, the problem is, of course, we have free migration within Europe, and the vast majority of numbers are actually there. I absolutely respect the government's desire to regulate migration from the rest of the world, but we need to get cleverer at it. We need to get the people who actually can add value, and as the Office for Budgetary Responsibility said the other day, we would be getting a lot more income into the UK if we were allowing the migration to come in at the current 250,000 level for the future.
I mean, would you like Britain to join Schengen, the agreement, and sign up to sort of border-free control?
I don't think that's practical. I would like to see a sort of front of house, which we're dealing with the Chinese, actually made invisible what clearance was going on behind the scenes. So if they're trying to go to continental Europe and to the UK, they just apply once, and we sort behind the scenes between Schengen and the UK exactly what documents and things are processed. And I'd like to see them able to apply in their own language rather than in English.
Well, I mean, those are some of the things that could be done, obviously, to make Britain look more welcome. Do you think the government, Mark, is going to hit its net migration target of tens of thousands by the next election?
I hope it will do. I still believe it
But
may do so.
Right.
I think we want to see really over the next few quarters a significant reduction in the net migration figure. Certainly the reduction in student visas we've seen in the Home Office data, we'd want to see those coming through to the net migration numbers, and we have to just sort of keep bearing down across all the channels. I'm concerned about this post-study work still being open to any graduate, but I think the government has done a lot of work to bear down on migration, and I hope we still will hit that target.
But net non-EU immigration is currently 250,000. To get it down to tens of thousands. Of course, if you did take the students out of it, you might get a lot closer.
Well, one, I'm not sure if that's right, because we are actually doing a lot to bring down the student numbers, particularly the bogus student numbers.
Do you agree with the Home Office in that field that it would be fiddling the figures if the government did that?
Yes, I do. I'm not actually sure it would help to hit the target. I don't think we should do it because it would be fiddling the figures. But more importantly, these students are here often for several years. Many of them sort of stay on after they've finished their student thing. And what my constituents want to see is they want to see the overall numbers reduced to, as we promised, sort of tens of thousands a year, not hundreds and hundreds of thousands as we saw under the previous government.
Mark Reckless, thank you very much, and also thank you to my guest of the day, Jo Valentine.